Hello, can you hear me? No? Am I off, on? Can you hear me? Oh yes, there you go. So thank you. I know it's a very sunny day out there and I can see quite a few people I think aren't coming in because they're lying in the sun actually now. So, but we've got some really great final speakers for you in the closing session. So final session of today is by two organisations that we know some of our members are also part of their networks. Climate, of course, is high on the agenda with the cost of living. Some say that some of the solutions are within climate action as well. But we've got two fabulous speakers, and Keep Scotland Beautiful and Circular Communities work alongside organisations across Scotland on circular economy projects and improve the general environment of Scotland. I'd like to welcome first Barry Fisher from Keep Scotland Beautiful and then Michael Cook from Circular Communities to deliver our final session of the conference. And then we're going to have questions and answers after each of the speakers as well. So you'll get a chance to ask any questions afterwards. So Barry, I think you're up first. Thank you.
Pauline, thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. I guess for some of you this will be the first time you've been at a conference for a couple of years, so therefore just a reminder that this is the first time some of us spoken to such a large audience for a couple of years. So if the slides and the conversation don't match up, please be kind. It's just the way it is. But it's a genuine thrill to be here. I became the Chief Executive of Keep Scotland Beautiful back in March 2020. What a time to be alive. And I feel in many ways this is me coming out to do my induction, or that's certainly what I say to my chair every time I see him. Because I feel I haven't engaged the network in the way that I probably envisaged when I was first thinking about starting with Keep Scotland Beautiful. And of course the DTAS membership is such an important part of our membership. And I'm acutely aware when I speak there's a huge amount of crossover, not just in terms of what we're trying to do, and obviously where that meets with you and your communities that you represent, but also at an operational level, we will have quite developed programs. So forgive me if I don't know you all individually at the moment. So I'm going to press that button. Excellent. So hopefully most of you will at least be aware of us as an organisation, but I had a bit of a sense coming in to Keep Scotland Beautiful that actually we're an organisation that made ourselves very, very complex, and that's probably due to the breadth of activity that we're involved in. And I have to say, when I asked my team, my new team, what is it that we do, I got a fantastic blizzard of information about all the different projects, and I said, we're going to have to stop that, because that doesn't describe why we're here or what we're about. So our priorities that we coalesced and agreed upon in July 2021, is climate change. No surprise there. Litter and waste, reducing it, and protecting and enhancing places. And that's what our priorities are. Everything else is an activity related to those priorities. Now that might sound quite straightforward to you, but actually for our organisation it was a bit of a battle won, just to remember what the purpose of all those activities is actually for. The other thing that I brought forward was actually making quite a forward statement about our values, really talking about, which were always there, but I don't think we led with them as much as we should have. And just two that I want to talk about. It will be no surprise, but collaboration is absolutely how we work. There is no way that we can reach or have the ambition to reach the communities that you're clearly engaged with unless we work with organisations like yourself and communities like yourself, and indeed business, who can also be very critical to the success of the activities that we're trying to do. And then positive, now that's an internal cue, but it's not about everyday people walking in, clapping their hands and singing the company song, although it's in my mind. We're going to try and bring that forward in the next 6 months. It is actually something which I think is quite important, which is climate change and litter and waste. They're quite negative. These are existential threats, and goodness knows we've got a fair share of existential threats at the moment. But I think somewhere in there we absolutely have to find the positive. I think for some bits in the environment sector this is quite challenging, but I've certainly throughout my life working in the charity sector and working with communities, when you find the sweet spot between making it enjoyable and tackling the really deep-seated challenges within our communities, I think actually that's where you get the biggest distance travelled. So it really is an opportunity, I think, to celebrate what our communities do as much as how we want to be as an organisation. But if I distill all of this down in our framework, which you've got here on the board, I think what we're... Board? Whiteboard? Screen. That's what they're called. Actually, what we're about is making environmental action possible. For some people and people in our own communities, the threats are so big, the challenges are so big that they don't know where to take the first step. And whilst we may be frustrated with that, we need to understand that that's incredibly important. And again, the roles that you play, not just in terms of some of the work you're doing around climate, but indeed around economic development, would bear true as well. I'm going to fly through as much of having talked about our priorities. Actually, I will talk a little bit about our activities as well. But in a nutshell, our role around climate change, which we're very proud about, is engagement and education. That's where we see the very, very important role. You'll know, many of you will have probably been a grant awardee from the CCF programme, which of course we no longer run. And actually there was a concern internally from our organisation that we thought that people in communities thought that we weren't going to be interested in climate change. Nothing could be further from the truth. But actually what we're doing is focusing our efforts on engagement and education. And fundamentally, the mantra is we want to make everyone in Scotland carbon and climate literate, and more of that in a second. So the kind of activities that we're involved in, I unashamedly talk about our education provision, because actually that is the very heart of helping young people not just understand and get motivated and sometimes, develop a bit of angst, but actually find the real positive about what they can do and what the opportunities are, particularly our Climate Ready Classrooms programme. That is an accredited programme within third year, which actually helps young people understand what the issues are around climate change, but also try and describe the opportunities around climate change adaptation and the just transition, which we've heard in some of the workshops today. I think we also need to help young people understand some of those opportunities as well. More broadly, in community space, which obviously, of course, is where you'll be most interested, the community climate action plans, which quite a lot of development trusts are involved in right now, some of which may be in the room. Apologies, we haven't met yet. I think this is a fantastic programme that doesn't have people from Stirling coming out to your community and telling you what to do in your community, but actually helping you to understand and be guided through a process, which I'm sure is a methodology that would absolutely match, and clearly it is because so many development trusts are involved in this programme. It's a 10-week programme. We work with a very diverse set of communities from Isla and Jura, Knoydart, Shotts, Fergusley Park and Paisley, and Newcastleton on the border. So we've got a fantastic reach. The demand for that programme is enormous, and we just couldn't facilitate it. We're funded to do a specific number, and we'd be absolutely delighted to talk to you in partnership. Some of you who may have applied and didn't get the opportunity to do that would love to speak to you about how we get more community groups through that programme. Climate emergency training, we think, is fundamental to how people understand some of the issues that they're going to be facing, but actually also what they can do at an individual level and indeed through organisations yourself. Again, the focus on carbon literacy, not assuming that everyone understands what people can do around this incredibly important challenge of our time. We've got a fantastic portfolio of activity in the public and the private sector, and we're delighted to be working with SCVO in partnership with Pass for All to deliver a programme of climate emergency training to the charity sector, and we'd love to develop that beyond the current funding period as well, so that we can make a real difference and remove barriers to participation in that programme. Finally, in terms of climate, contribution to climate, it's about helping people to take action. You can come on, you go onto our website and look at the climate emergency courses, but actually it's the leadership, I think, of your organisations, and I think we've heard many of that, the leadership role that you play in your communities in helping people connect to what they can do rather than things that they don't feel they can because it's such a big problem is enormous. So we're delighted to be working with many trusts in this space. The next area of our focus, if you like, our priorities, forgive me, See, I thought I'd get it wrong at one point. A gratuitously nice picture of the west coast of Scotland, of course, but to describe one of the greatest challenges we still have. I would love to stand here and tell you that this is done. Next week, we're closing down our litter division. It's all finished. We've all cracked it. It's getting worse. Now, I'm not talking about the last couple of weeks, which actually viscerally put in our mind a huge challenge, which is the significant overconsumption that we have as a country. But beyond that, the numbers are going in the wrong direction. Now, some of you as communities will be feeling that most keenly. For others, it will be less obvious. The real scandal is it's getting worse in some of our more deprived communities. This is a significant issue. It's damaging to the environment, but it's also damaging to the health and well-being of some of our most marginalised communities. So again, moving on to the positive, we've called and worked behind very, very hard behind the scenes, and we're looking forward to a new national litter strategy and fly tipping strategy coming forward, hopefully in the autumn. But some of the issues remain stubbornly the same. We have, as a country, we have a problem with the relationship with litter, and we're calling it out. We want to do something about it. And you can see it through an economic lens, you know, the value of a community, how it looks as a community. And for those of you, particularly in some of our more rural authorities, rural areas, with a deep relationship to the likes of the tourism industry, these can be quite acute. And some of the pressures and visitor management pressures, particularly over the last couple of years, have placed even more strain upon some of the systems that we rely on. Dogfiling in itself, one of the first things I did when I became Chief Executive of Keep Scotland Beautiful was sign off on the beautifully titled Turd Tag campaign. So if you want to go and look at that, you're more than welcome. A funny way to engage people, though, positively, in actually what is a very, very real issue. And actually, lockdown has created its own challenges in terms of masks, in terms of gloves, that have entered into the survey work that we've been doing, all of which, of course, include plastic. So some really significant activities there, issues there. In terms of what we're doing, again, some of you will already be involved in some of our programmes, the Clean Up Scotland campaign. We ran a very successful programme in Glasgow, working with some of the food retailers, removing 500,000 cups from the streets of Glasgow. It's not enough, but it's certainly a start, and we're hoping to bring that to other areas of Scotland. Our upstream battle now in the Clyde, but also in the Tay River, Tayside area. Again, thinking about marine litter from where it starts, which is up in the watercourses, up in the hills, and it makes its way into the river, connecting people and schools and communities to that issue. And we recently launched the Community Highland Waste Partnership. So again, working with local communities in the Highland area, or at least some of those communities, to look at the specific issues in those areas. Again, what can you do? What can your organisations do? We'd love the whole of Scotland to get involved in our clean-up activities. Again, your leadership at a local level, supporting, perhaps once, perhaps twice, but I'm sure many of you do it more often. Litter picking activity sends out not just an issue of how much material you've collected, but a very powerful statement to the community that we care. And please don't underestimate the issue of we care in terms of the role that you play there. We do survey work in terms of genuinely trying to be definitive, using data to understand what the problem is. But if you can share our messages, and we'd be delighted to re-engage with the DTAS network, Pauline, in a more, I know we've talked about this offline, if we can share these messages and the public get consistent messaging about this, we'd certainly love to do that. And again, I guess our final area of focus, probably the area where we think we have most to share with you, and most close alignment. But I think the phrase for me is we want people to love where they live, wherever that is in this amazing country that we call home. And we've got a significant portfolio of activity going on there. Again, many of which your organisations will be touching with. Beautiful Scotland and It's Your Neighbourhood. These groups, these volunteer groups, are some of our most committed citizens. They're there not just picking up litter, but actually trying to make a difference to the many communities in which where they are. I visited a group recently, and you could describe it as a group that makes sure that a town has nice flower baskets and makes the place look like it's a welcoming place to be, and making it good for citizens and for visitors. Actually, you could easily describe it as a social isolation project, bringing people together around common endeavour, as you know as well as me, is an incredibly powerful proposition. And the more of these groups we can get, particularly in our more marginalised communities, I think the stronger people's connection to the environment can be, and therefore some of the more difficult conversations that we're going to have, I think become easier when they're more invested. Again, back on the positive, our two sort of flagship programmes, Beach Awards and Flag Awards for Parks, have a huge community component. And with the challenges that local government face, I'm delighted to see that many communities are stepping up and being the lead for those award programmes. Again, celebrating those green and blue spaces that have meant so much to us, during lockdown, if you can remember that far back. But of course, for many of us, those economic drivers for why people want to come to an area are incredibly powerful. Part of your work, drawing people to your place. We have a range of other programmes. The National Award for Environmental Excellence is really a way to celebrate organisations' commitment to sustainability. We've got a fantastic portfolio of work going on within the housing sector. Not just making a difference for organisations, but for the tenants who live there. They're really, really proud of being part of that programme. So I think there are some messages there in terms of what we can do. Our Canal College programme is working with some people who are young people, not exclusively young people, who are actually quite far from the labour market. But again, bringing them into a conversation about how they can be involved in supporting local community assets. We started with the canal, and we anticipate that that programme will be going much more into sort of broader sort of portfolio of heritage assets. I'm kind of conscious of time, so I think I'll bring us to a close. But just by saying, it is a pleasure to be here. I've had a real spent the morning here, and just listening, I hope, as much as talking to some of the issues that people have been speaking about. And of course, the issues around the current crisis is fresh within our minds. But I think there is an opportunity in terms of this huge disruption in our economy, what we can do differently as much as it was in the pandemic. And I think we have to seize that moment and think differently how we can improve the places which you feel so passionately about. So I think I'll pause there, Pauline, if you're happy.
So we're just going to take any questions for Barry? Well, you might have got away lightly here, Barry. They'll catch you afterwards. Okay. All right. So thank you very much, Barry. So next up, we have Michael from Circular Communities. Here you go.
Thank you, and thank you for the welcome. I wonder if any of you, it is your first event since the pandemic, and you've had this nagging thought in the back of your mind all day, and you can't quite work out what it is, and it's, how do I mute the speaker when they get boring? I hope that's not what you're dwelling on through this, but it's obviously, when we're face to face, we don't have the same options that we used to have on Teams or Zoom at home, do we? It's great to be with you today, and an honour to be closing out the day. And I've got a bit of a provocation for you. I want to make you think, give you some food for thought on the train home, or the bus home, or the car home, or the walk home, or the cycle home, or whatever you're doing. So we're all about the circular economy. That's what it says on the tin. That's what our new name is. In case you're wondering, where's this organisation come from? We used to be Community Resources Network Scotland, CRNS. But we're Circular Community Scotland now. So really, why your community, where you work and what you're doing, needs a more circular economy, and I'm breaking that into three parts. Part one, the theory, why your community needs a circular economy. Let's start there. When you go to talks about climate change, totally echo what Barry said, actually, that it's often a bit depressing, it's certainly very challenging, and where's the positivity in that? I was reminded on a talk the other day, a fact I knew, but was that in Japanese language, in the written language, the same word for challenge, accented differently, but the same character, is the word opportunity. Interesting thing to think about when you face challenges in life, but also interesting in relation to climate and whether there is an opportunity for a better way of being. We think part of the answer to that is the circular economy. When you think about climate change, the image that comes to your mind, is it something like this? Or maybe this? transport and energy. I want it to be including something like this, shopping. One of the causes of climate change is consumption, or more particularly, overconsumption. It's not just the green energy or the lack of it, or the green transport or the lack of it. It's also how much stuff we buy. And those images of bins overflowing in Edinburgh just showed how much stuff we do buy and throw away. Our friends at CEPA have done some research on this and say if the whole world was to live like we do here in Scotland, we would need 3 planet Earths to meet the level of demand for the resources that we have. And of course, we only have one. As the protesters on the street said during COP26, there is no planet B and there is no planet C either. We only have planet A. We only have the one planet. Or at Zero Waste Scotland, the organisation that we're funded by for our network services, these stats here. Only 10% of our carbon footprint in Scotland comes from heating our home, 8% from driving our car, and 82% from all the stuff and services that we buy. So we can't ignore consumption and overconsumption if we're going to tackle climate change. The fact is, over the last 20, 30 years, we've done a lot about energy production and shifting to renewables. We're starting to do a lot about transport and shifting to public transport and electric cars. What's left? We have to talk about the C word, consumption. So what we have at the moment is a linear economy. We take stuff out the ground, we make it into products, we sell those products, we buy, we consume, choose, and then we throw it away when we're finished with it. We lose it into landfill or incineration. And that's pretty much every environmental problem we have stems from one of these stages. Just to give you an example, starting at the left, everything about exhaust extraction, conflict minerals, deforestation, habitat loss, it's all because we're consuming more, we're taking more resources out the ground than it can cope with. So we cut the forest down to put an open cast mine, lots of problems there. At the end of life, we have what Barry was talking about, we have litter, we have pollution, we have marine plastic, we have landfill. And underpinning all of it, underpinning that overconsumption, climate change. Energy use, transportation. You know, that product that's manufactured in China is then shipped to me, and it's sold. There's a lot of energy that goes into that, and that is a driver of carbon emissions and climate change. So what's the alternative? Circular economy, where we don't take stuff out the ground and we don't throw stuff away at the end. We keep everything in high value use for as long as possible. If it's broken, we fix it. If I'm finished with it, someone else can use it. If it can't be used for what it was made for, then we recycle the valuable resources in it. We don't think of it as waste anymore, we think of it as resources. And the benefits of a circular economy, and this has been really interesting, it's come out, we had a stand here and people came and talked to me, and I almost found myself having the same conversation over and over again, which was brilliant in a really positive sense, because it really drove home to me the importance of this principle. People come and talk to me sometimes and they say, oh, sorry, we're not really an environmental charity. And I'd say, well, what do you do? And they'd say, well, we're about social deprivation and about employability. And I say, great, well, what do you do? That's really important. And it would turn out that they're doing something circular economy related. And it's actually, I think the days of thinking of these as 4 different benefits is actually past. I think they're all massively interrelated and multiple facets of the same thing. Dare I go as far as saying I think the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis are really connected. You know, what's driving our cost of living? Gas prices, fossil fuel. What's the answer to these things? It is a new way of doing things. But we talk at Circular Community Scotland about 4 Ps. It's triple bottom line reporting, really, social, environmental and economic, and we've put place in there because I think you would understand as well as anyone that place is really important. How does the circular economy help here? People, all the social benefits, helps those that are economically disadvantaged, provides social impact, green skills, job creation. 10,000 tons of resources going to landfill creates 6 jobs. 10,000 tons of resources going to incineration creates 1 job. 10,000 tonnes, the same 10,000 tonnes of material going to reuse creates about 286 jobs. So you can create jobs through moving into a circular economy from our current throwaway culture. Pounds, waste is not good business. Wasting, if your strategy was to waste stuff, I don't think you would get approval by your board. Waste is bad business. And actually driving waste out of businesses and showing better ways, less wasteful ways of doing business makes a lot of sense from an economic point of view. But I think there's also new business models, and we've had a lot of conversations today about sharing libraries and repair cafes. There's leasing schemes. These are all ways of delivering more circularity in how people use and consume. That are obviously opportunities for new businesses or new social enterprises, in our case, to form. Planet, I didn't start there. I deliberately didn't start there because that's what everyone expects it to be all about the planet. But I'm a great believer that we can't solve climate change. We can't combat global warming without taking people with us. And actually, we've got to think about what's in it for people, what's in it for communities. I sometimes start talks with a sort of a provocation that says, I've got good news and bad news for you. The bad news, we'll get that out of the way, is that you're the problem. You're causing climate change. I'm the problem. Us together, our lifestyles, our organizations, our collective footprint is what's driving climate change. The good news is that you're the solution. I'm the solution. We together need to be the solution because only our behaviors changing can actually make the difference that we need to see. We can't just wait for someone else to do it because it's actually all of us together. And then place. And I'd highlight a bit here because this is the DTAS conference. I think this is important. High street regeneration. That's a problem, death at the high street as Amazon's come in and online shopping, other brands available obviously, cause real problems on our high street. A circular economy can bring jobs back to the high street. Why? Because it's not manufactured in China, it's maybe repaired in your high street. That can bring people into the high street. Maybe they have a cup of coffee while they're doing that, things that the high street only can do. And we heard a lot this morning about community wealth building, keeping things local, and reinvesting in our communities, hearing what our communities need. Second part, and this is quicker, you'll be pleased to know, otherwise you're looking for that mute button that you don't have. I took the challenge that Pauline gave me of including some of the DTAS members and looked to see whether they were also our members and what you've been doing on circular community-related things. So 4 little case studies, really, and I'm not going to talk in detail about them, but just on those 4 Ps. Mullen and Iona Community Trust, we heard from Sandy this morning, didn't we? Their tagline or mission statement is improving the quality of life for island residents. It's really easy to understand your community when you're an island, isn't it? Because you've got borders, you've got a coastline. Some of the things that Mullen and Iona Community Trust do under MESS, which is Mullen and Iona Environmentally Sensitive Solutions, recycling collections, recycling bins, upcycling, beach cleans. They also run 3 reuse shops, financially sustainable. And they built that up over about 25 years. But, all of that is keeping it circular, keeping it on the island, stopping the need for stuff to be shipped in, stopping the need for waste to be shipped out, meeting the needs of that island community in that case. This is one of our own projects, and again, it ties in with what was being said earlier around procurement and how hard it is, and I would agree, it's quite difficult, quite challenging. But one of the projects we run is a reuse consortium, and this is our organisation, Circular Community Scotland, bid for and won a place on Scotland Excel's national procurement framework, but we don't deliver anything ourselves. It's for reuse furniture, so that is more environmentally sustainable than new, but the people delivering the furniture and sourcing the furniture are our members, so 17 of our members who are trading on the reuse consortium, 8-9 local authorities purchasing for that. It turned over just over £500,000 last year, created 18 jobs. And what's exciting about it is it started 100% with grant funding, and it's now 100% self-sufficient, and is hopefully going to continue for many iterations of that procurement framework. And I would say In other fields, I think consortium models where maybe a national body like a DTAS or ourselves or someone else, but local different organisations on the ground delivering for that community is maybe a way to go to overcome some of the difficulties with procurement. Planet. Glasgow Eco Trust, lots of projects that you may think of as environmental, but I think you could equally think of as social. A bike project deals on wheels, active travel. Bike reuse is fantastic circular economy because it's active travel, which is good for the environment. It's good for your health and mental health and well-being. It's good for congestion and pollution in the city. But also, bike reuse is actually demonstrating circular economy. You know, don't need to throw the bike away and buy a new one. You can actually get it repaired and get it fixed. The Glasgow City Food Plan, I think, which had funding from National Lottery Community Fund, I think, we had a stand earlier on. The Green Glasgow Map, example of all the different ways you can buy green, environmentally responsible services and products. Which is a screen print of that. So different ways they've served their community, very different from Mull, city centre Glasgow. And then lastly, place. So I looked for someone that had their place name in their title, Greener Kirkcaldy. I think I saw someone from Greener Kirkcaldy here today. So just examples of what they do and how they're interpreting and delivering more environmentally sustainable living and a circular economy within that. Thinking about issues like town centre regeneration, climate-friendly living guide, very much plugging in Kirkcaldy, but also wider in Fife with Climate Action Fife, which I think is a really good model. I know that they get, I believe Greener Kirkcaldy give help around energy in homes as well, which is obviously, sadly, going to be in demand with the current cost of gas. But obviously that's some good can come from the current crisis if people find out ways to reduce their emissions through that use. So really just 4 examples, and I guess my sort of final area is taking it further. What could you do? And what's the shape of your community? What does your community need? And really encourage you to think about breaking silos down and not thinking we're not an environmental charity or we are an environmental charity, and actually just thinking we're about our local community. One of our community's concerns is climate change. One of our community's concern is the litter in our community. Another is, you know, getting affordable access to stuff and the amount of consumption that's happening. All of that is real issues for your community. Cost of living crisis is only going to make that more so. And so what could you do to respond to it? And if there's any way, I know Barry would be keen to hear from you from Keep Scotland Beautiful. There's things that they're doing, but I'll highlight three projects that we have that might be relevant. So the first one, Share and Repair Project. This is a 3-year project that's just got started, and it's all about encouraging sharing libraries and repair cafes across Scotland. And you know, I believe that sharing and repairing are 2 behaviours that there's slightly more openness to exploring. Maybe, I mean, if nothing else, the current cost of living crisis means I might want to borrow something instead of buy it. It might mean that I want to repair something instead of replacing it. So you can meet the needs of your community from a cost of living perspective. But these are fantastic models for reducing consumption. That 82% of our footprint that we haven't dealt with yet, this is a way to do that. Why? Because my colleague's going to tell me off for quoting this stat, but it's still the best stat I've got. It's estimated that the average drill, household drill, is used for 13 minutes in its life. We don't all need to own one. What I need is a hole in the wall. I don't need a drill. Okay? So maybe I could borrow the drill. To put that hole in the wall and then give it back when I've done it. And it'll, you know, in my house, if I'm honest, it's not 13 minutes, it's probably less than that because I'm not good at the DIY. What I actually need is someone to drill a hole in the wall for me, which ends up being my wife, I'm ashamed to say, because I always make a pig's ear of it. But anyway, the principle, do we all need to own so much stuff? And the truth is that we buy stuff for a multitude of reasons. One, because we think we need it, but the other, it makes us feel good. It's a kind of therapy. Actually, men buy drills because they want to be manly, except me, forgive me. So we need to rethink consumption. And one of the things that can help us rethink consumption, I think, is sharing economies. And maybe some of your organizations in the heart of your community could be that. To your community, there are things that maybe not everyone needs to own. some of the things we've heard sharing libraries including are like disco lights and chocolate fondue fountains and stuff for parties. You know, not everyone needs to own one. And actually, but if there was one in your community, who wouldn't borrow that? I would. So yeah, that's one way, and repair cafes very similar. You know, people think stuff breaks, get them fixed. Another model is just think about the reuse consortium. I'm thinking about this for the model, not so much that you would be involved in our reuse consortium, but is there stuff that maybe our learning could be shared with you, that there is a model that it could break down some of the procurement issues that do really exist. It is hard. And then the last one, we've not got a logo yet, is our bike reuse coordinator. We've got a new role there, which is all looking about encouraging bike reuse because it's a great way of helping the planet. So anything bikes related, we'd love to hear you on that. But that really is all I want to say. Climate change is real. We probably don't need convincing of that on a day like today. It's very warm. But, you know, don't just be part of the problem, which we all are, if we're honest. Let's all be part of the solution. And if we can help you in some way, we'd be really pleased to hear from you. Thank you.
So just another opportunity for any questions and answers. I think really inspiring about all the stuff that's going on. Can't wait to work with both of you through DTAS. But any questions for? Yes. I'll try and get this. I'm the runner now.
Hello. I'm Alex. I'm from Peebles Community Trust. We set up the reuse hub in Peebles. During lockdown, we turned over £100,000 last week. We've just went beyond that, and we're setting up a library of things as well. I wanted to ask you about the F word funding, please, because we haven't had any.
Yeah. Well, I've got no magic answer to that. I think it's really challenging funding times. I mean, I think what I've heard from Scottish Government is climate funding is being mainstreamed, which my worry would be that that's code for there isn't any. But I think you need to, I think one key to unlocking it is talk about all 4 Ps in climate work and talk about how it's community related and, you know, have your answer in lots of different funds. Certainly as a small NGO ourselves, we don't have funds to give away, and I think it is really sad that Climate Challenge funding was pulled and there wasn't a replacement to it, which is no fault of the organisation that was running it before. There are climate hubs coming along, as I understand it, and going to be coming in different communities, and that's gathering pace, and there should be, you know, an opportunity to support collaborative working and things like that in relation to climate hubs, but I'm none the wiser than you, probably. We did, you got your right to reply, but while the mic's coming to you, we did fill in a recent consultation for the Circular Economy Bill, and we made the point over and over again that the policies that are being talked about are really good, but they're only really 2 or 3 legs of the chair, and the fourth one is funding. We need to invest in this stuff. I mean, I believe that, you know, in the next 10 years, we need to do for reuse what we've done in the last 40 years for recycling. We need to make it mainstream, easy, convenient, attractive, and that requires funding. Back to you. Let me hear your response.
So we have a community trust that's benefited from the framework that is DTAS. We benefited from being able to purchase an asset in the centre of town, TIC.
Great.
We had me for capacity. We have capacity with a huge amount of members, TIC. We've just got to the end of that capacity funding. We've demonstrated what you can do with an asset. We can demonstrate what the community wants. They donate all of their stuff that would otherwise end up in landfill. We sell it.
Yeah.
And on 3.5 days a week, now we started off with a table outside the door. I think the council has just noticed us, but I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But you have a development trust who's supporting all of these things, but there's still no funding. And so what happens? And I think that needs to be aired. It needs to be said, because I think there's a lot of development trusts that are ahead of us, some that are behind us, but we have demonstrated everything that DTAS really wants to see in communities, and our community is saying, this is fantastic. And our library of things, we're going to call it The Lot. We're looking to launch that soon. And you can get everything. It's full of The Lot. And we were donating most things. So you can come and you can get everything you need to go camping.
Yeah.
And anything that you need. We have mobility things, etc. So we're there, but we really need that support now, please.
Yeah, I mean...
And I think it's a question for DTAS as well as
Yeah.
yourself, isn't it, here? So, so yeah, I think it's certainly something that we can be talking. We're around the tables of net zero strategy groups and various other things. So we are talking, seeing if there's a collective voice that we can get to actually move things forward. But the point is taken. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and I think Sandy was asking a similar point through a question this morning. I think there's too much funding for things that are new and innovative, and not enough funding for things that are established, proven, and work. Which I'm not saying those are two poles that are opposites, but there is a tension there for me that actually, we need more revenue funding, less capital funding. We need more ongoing funding, more long-term funding, less short-term funding. Climate change is a long-term problem. It's taken a century and a half to get into this situation. It's hopefully not going to take a century and a half to get out of it. But Joe Biden, when he was vice president, said, "Don't tell me your priorities, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities." So I think that's a question for climate change and for communities and for sustainability is, where's the investment? Because I think we can give a massive return on that investment, but that investment is needed.
Yep, agreed. Any more questions? Toby.
Thanks, Michael. That was really interesting, especially the stuff around the share and repair network. I think a lot of that depends on skills that were probably commonplace once that no longer are, like sewing and DIY and woodworking. I wondered if you had good examples of kind of intergenerational projects in communities, because I think that's probably a great way to tackle things like social isolation as well. Absolutely.
I mean, I think people, yes, is the answer. And it's, having a conversation about this earlier today, stereotypically it might be the elder woman that's really good at the sewing skills and the younger youth who can help you work out how to use your phone. But it isn't always as simple as that. But different skills, different generations have different skills. Some of what we're talking about in terms of circular economy isn't a new idea. It's a really old idea. 16th of August next year, there will be a deposit on all drinks bottles sold in Scotland. That's coming, deposit return scheme. Is that a new idea? I don't think so. It's actually an old idea that's coming back. But that's okay. I think some of how, so I welcome that, but I do think that, back to what I said about challenge and opportunity, I think break down the silos between those 4 Ps that I put up on the screen, blur them out. Don't, isolate them for your funding applications to get the funding, but when it comes to it, you don't need to choose between serving your community, helping people, and combating climate change. They're the same thing. It's the same broken system that messed them all up in the first place, and a solution to one will also look a lot like the solution to another. It's about putting people first in a sustainable way in their environment. So absolutely, whether your passion is to start a repair project or a sharing project to combat poverty in your community, people that don't have access, we have excess and not access a lot of the time, or whether it is actually to drive down carbon emissions for your community, you don't need to choose. You can do both at the same time.
Thank you very much. And that's all the time we have for questions, I'm afraid. So thank you very much, Michael. So our closing remarks are going to be by Reid Hutchison, who's our Vice Chair. So, Reid.
Thank you, Pauline. So it's my privilege to just say a final few thanks and obviously to close the conference, but I just want to check the temperature in the room apart from the obviously heat. So has everybody enjoyed the annual conference face-to-face? So anyway, afternoon colleagues. For those of you who have, thanks for sticking with us. I think it's been a fantastic couple of days at the conference and a real pleasure to get back to face-to-face networking and actually having good conversations. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. But on behalf of the board and the staff, I really want to thank you all for coming along. We've delegates from all over Scotland, as we've heard. We've our friends and neighbours in DTINI, thank you Charlie, and Tony from Locality and from DT Wales, so that's been superb. I think it's also would be remiss of me not to say, for many of the DTAS staff, this is their first conference, and I think we should show the appreciation of them for pulling this together. I think that's been phenomenal. And I'm also going to single out the actual team who directly did it, and they'll be embarrassed me by saying this, but I will say it. So thanks to Kay, to Amy, to Claire. I mean, they've been the powerhouse behind all of the staff. I also want to thank our funders, and without them, some of this would not have been possible. So the Community Lottery Fund, Community Central Halls, who graciously did the drinks reception last night, and of course our friends and colleagues and funders at Acorns to Trees. So a huge thank you to all our speakers and contributors, but most of all, I'd like to thank you. This conference wouldn't have been possible without you. I hope for those who are new, you've enjoyed it. I hope those of you who've been here before have reacquainted with old now acquaintances and made some new contacts. As Pauline said ably at the AGM last night, next year will be our 20th anniversary, so we've got some exciting plans, which you can't hear about too much just now, but throughout the year we'll be showcasing membership achievements in the journey of DTAS itself. So look out for the details and please get involved. We welcomed 24 new members last year, so as Pauline said, we're at 349 members. I'm sure that will grow from strength to strength, but we want to show the impact that those have made over the last 20 years. Just a few practical arrangements, and I know everybody groans at this, but please, you'll have saw that there's an evaluation in your registration packs, but you'll get an email reminder in a couple of days. Please fill that out. That tells us what you enjoyed. It tells us what we can do better for the future. And for those of you who are travelling about and need to get a train, the shuttle bus will be working its way between 4 and 5 o'clock. I wish you all safe travels. For those who are not in a big hurry, there will still be coffee and tea, so please continue to network. But again, thank you very much.